Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Proctor. I'm a professor at Boston College and one of the co-creators of the CLAVES curriculum. It's my job to introduce you to CLAVES, which stands for Cultivating Linguistic Awareness for Voice and Equity in Schools. Welcome. First, I just want to remind you that if you want direct access to the CLAVES lesson plans, and information about teaching claves, please use these QR codes or go to the links on the screen. So to get started, the origins of claves. So I want to sort of just talk to you a little bit about how this curriculum got started. It's a long time in development. And it started in 2009 with my colleague Rebecca Silverman. She and I did some developmental research where we investigated the role of vocabulary in predicting reading comprehension, particularly for bilingual students, and specifically also for students who were Spanish English bilinguals. We were very interested in not just the role of vocabulary breadth, that is, how many words do you know? We know that that predicts reading comprehension, but also vocabulary depth. That is, how well do you know word meanings? And to explore vocabulary depth, we thought a lot about morphology, we thought a lot about semantics, and we thought a lot about syntax as being reflective of vocabulary depth. I'll go into detail on what those are in a little bit. But what we found was for bilingual students and for monolingual students, all of these components of vocabulary depth predicted reading comprehension. And so we thought that that was interesting. And as a result, we decided to apply for an additional funding to create a curriculum based on those findings. And so from 2014 to 2017, we were developing what became the CLAVES curriculum. We worked with multilingual students and their teachers in a very iterative fashion to design what became the pilot CLAVES curriculum. We implemented that with teachers. We found that there was some evidence of effectiveness. And then from 2020 to 2025, we got funding to scale up the CLAVES curriculum and really explore that in multiple sites across Northern California. And it's the result of that implementation that brings us to this point here today. So part of the CLAVES design, CLAVES is an English medium curriculum. That is, most of the texts are in English. The lesson plans are written in English, but it encourages student multilingualism. So just because the curriculum is English medium doesn't mean that the curriculum has to be English only. We promote in CLAVES language in the service of reading comprehension. So it's a language-based literacy curriculum. It is not a phonics program. So it is not designed to teach kids the sound symbol relationships, how to decode words. That is not the point of CLAVES. The point of CLAVES is to develop language in reading comprehension. Also, CLAVES was developed for multilingual students at higher levels of English proficiency. So for students who are at levels 1 and 2 of English proficiency, that is emerging in their English proficiency, CLAVES will not be an appropriate curriculum for them because the language is somewhat complex. And so being able to access that requires higher levels of English proficiency. It is appropriate for students who are home English speakers, but who also need language support for reading comprehension. So CLAVES has been implemented in small groups with kids who struggle with reading who are monolingual English speakers. It was also primarily designed for small group instruction between 4 to 6 students in a group. But as a result of the work we've been doing over the past 5 years, we found that teachers are very adept at adapting CLAVES to whole group context as well. So that's another way to think about implementing CLAVES. So as a matter of design, so I just want you to take a closer look at this. We are focused, as I said, on language-based literacy instruction. And so CLAVES will be happening in multiple sociocultural contexts. You might be a 4th grade ESL teacher, or you might be a 5th grade mainstream teacher with multilingual students in your classroom. Those different contexts matter for how CLAVES gets implemented. But within those different sociocultural contexts, these 5 dimensions really characterize what's going on when you implement Claves. That is, we're thinking about spoken, sign, and written languages. We're thinking about bi and multilingualism amongst our students and ourselves as teachers. We're focused on engaging in socially relevant texts. We are teaching directly about language, but we're also using discussion to understand language and ideas in text. So all of those things are going on amidst very different sociocultural contexts. So I'm going to talk about first the language components of Claves. Again, as I mentioned before, our main focuses of language instruction are semantics, morphology, and syntax. So with vocabulary and semantics, what we mean here is knowing what the words mean and how they relate to each other. So if I said the word dog and asked you to tell me what are some related words, you might think furry, bark, cat, bite, leash, things like that. That's semantics. Semantic relations are how words go together conceptually. And we're really focused on that in Claves, not just knowing what a word means, but what are associated words that help you understand that meaning better. The next construct is morphology. So how do word parts go together? And there are 3 kinds of morphology. Claves is focused on one. So the first is inflectional morphology, where we're just talking about plural and past tense endings. So dog plus s equals dogs. Tooth. The next one is compound morphology, where you put 2 full words together. Tooth and brush is toothbrush. Compound morphology. The one we focus on in Claves is called derivational morphology, and that is primarily focused on prefixes and suffixes. So you take ity and you add that to the word popular, and you get popularity. That's important because that ity travels, clarity, prosperity, right? If you know what that ity does to a word, which is to turn it into a noun, you are making more word knowledge by knowing a word part. So derivational morphology is a very big part of Claves. And then finally, syntax. How does grammar work? So in Claves, we think about nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Just being able to identify those is initially important. Then we move into simple and complex sentences, being able to identify subject, verb, and object, and then connecting words like but that make a complex sentence. And then finally, also things like references. So if you say Carlos had to walk to the school because he missed the bus, knowing that he is referring back to Carlos is an important dimension and requires that we all attend to how language works. So speaking of how language works, language use in Claves is also very important. And so we'll take a quick look at this. When we think about Claves and discussions, we want kids to be talking to each other. We don't want teachers to be doing all the talking. And so collaborative discussions are a central component of how Claves instruction works. And what we ask kids to do through the lesson plans, through the text we've selected, and through the questions that we've selected for those texts is to take a critical stance on important social issues. This could be, should there be zoos? Should wolves be readmitted into Yellowstone National Park? Students have to do their own learning and research on these topics and then formulate their own opinions and stances and discuss them with each other. In so doing, they're developing oral and written language, text and world understandings, and argumentation skills, all of which are considered critically important when we think about new standards in literacy that are around today. And again, as before, all of this is taking place in unique developmental, linguistic, and sociocultural contexts. So the instructional principles that help us get to language use and language components in Claves and the theory of change starts with our instructional principles. So in Claves, we're thinking about 4 major instructional principles. One is metalinguistic awareness, and that's being able to identify, reflect on, and manipulate language through talk and play. So kids are talking and playing with those components of language. They're breaking down words morphologically. They're talking about big ideas in text, but they're thinking about how language functions. And that language functioning is best tapped through dialogic teaching, where teachers are encouraging student talk As teachers, your goal and your job is to step back and facilitate discussion about language and text that supports them in generating meaning and understanding. That is, kids should be doing the talking, building the understanding, something that's often called in the research interthinking. So they're thinking together. A third principle is multilingualism, where teachers and students use their languages and their lived experiences to make meaning and share thinking. So, if students speak languages other than English, they're encouraged to bring those languages to the discussion about language. How do you translate words from English into their home languages? Are there cognates involved? Rapid and rápido in Spanish and English. Ways of thinking about home languages and their interactions with our own instruction in the language that we're teaching about is critically important in Claves, as is multimodality, which is to say that not all texts are just printed PDF documents or books. Those are important texts and those are throughout Claves, but so too are games and multimedia and news articles and videos, lots of different ways to impart content knowledge so that kids can have those critical discussions in claves. Our theory of change, again, comes back to these principles. So, instruction that centers multilingualism, metalinguistic awareness, dialogic teaching and reasoning, and multimodal text should directly affect students' vocabulary, their morphology, their syntax, and their strategic language use. Those developing should then affect these larger constructs that are very important to us as teachers, as school-based leaders, as policymakers, which is reading comprehension, language proficiency, and writing. Those are the what we like to call the big ticket items that are very important and the needle that we want to move on. So, getting ready to teach Claves, what you're going to see coming up in the next few slide decks and presentations are an introduction to the lesson plans, which you see on your left here, some of the big questions that come up in Claves, slide decks that provide definitions for key terms, for example, here like demonstrate. Moving to the right is an example of one of the video texts that we use in Claves. And then down there at the bottom on the right is an example of some of the gaming that students do around syntax, morphology, and semantics throughout the curriculum. So what's next? Next, you'll be hearing from some other colleagues that will give you a curriculum overview, getting ready to teach Claves, and then the Claves scope and sequence. What does this look like? What are the texts? What are the words that we focus on? And what are the big questions? So I welcome you to the Claves family. Good luck getting started. I hope this little introduction has been somewhat helpful in orienting you to our curriculum. And good luck implementing. Thank you.